Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What? Today we've got Katie Narain on and she's a partner GTM at MoonPay. Hi Katie.
Hi Daniel, how are you?
Good, thank you. Good. How are you?
Yes, good, thanks. Busy week, but it's always crazy. So yeah, happy to be here.
Pleasure to have you on. Katie, should we jump straight in? Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
So I work cross-functionally as partner marketing manager, managing GTM strategy, executing it on a general and granular level for new and existing partners at one of the leading Web3 infrastructure companies, MoonPay. It's an incredibly exciting time for us. We're partnering with a lot of businesses, both Web3 and Web2, and we have a great brand marketing strategy. Yeah.
Interesting. So let's go way back and let's go back to the start of your career.
Yeah.
So did you go to university or did you go straight into work? What was that kind of beginning steps your career look like?
So I always wanted to go to university, and I did. I went to Exeter, and I think it's always this struggling, a hard time to kind of decide what you want to do. And for me, I wanted to make sure that when I studied something, and even now, right, in my career, I want to make sure that I do something I really enjoy. So I studied history and ancient history with a year abroad in Germany. It was amazing. I love to travel and explore new places. So to have a year abroad scheme was really, really cool.
That is very cool. I'm a massive history buff, so if I was going to do any degree, it would have been that. How did you find it? Did you enjoy it?
Absolutely loved it. Yeah, and I think with one of those subjects where you're reading in depth and you're studying different modules and there's a lot of work, as with any degree, I think you have to be super interested and invested and where you're choosing different topics. Yeah, incredibly exciting. And I still think one of the most relevant degrees you can do in terms of conversation, connecting, the amount of times in networking events or meeting people that historical things come up is yeah insane.
That's really interesting. Now, I personally am a bit of an advocate for going straight into work, unless you feel like going to university is the right thing for you, or you specifically want to study something you have in mind, opposed to I had a lot of friends that just went to university because they thought that was the thing they should do.
Mm-hmm.
So going into work and having talked to quite a few people on the podcast, going into work now seems like quite a good route. Now, it sounds like you really valued your time at university.
Absolutely.
Do you think would you still have gone to university now, or do you think maybe there was a way to go into what you're doing without going to uni?
I think at the time where I went to university, there were still few companies that would hire you unless you had a degree and a 2-1 degree at that. I had offers from RBS, IBM, those kind of really traditional tech and finance places,
Mm,
some of which have now changed their policy, but I knew that that was a step. And I think, my parents were first generation university goers. And so for them, that was really important as well. So it was always kind of just in my plan. I am quite an academic person, so I like to be challenged academically. And for me, being able to have that time to learn, study, read is priceless. And I also think the skills that you learn living away from home for the first time, looking after
mm.
yourself, things that you do in the real world, if you've just lived at home and then you go straight into something like a job, I don't think you have that gap. And looking back at it, I could have even used my time better. I think you can definitely do more networking and really build up that career path. But also, I was part of a cheerleading squad. Some of my best friends now are from that time. It was great to compete nationally. All of that, all of the above that you wouldn't have got the opportunity to had you just gone into work. So I think there's merit to going to university.
Yeah, you make a great case for it. So after you left university, what was your first job like?
My first job, what was it? Oh, I did a few things just right after university. But I was at this wonderful little firm called Holland Mountain, and it was essentially private equity consultancy. That was cool. It's my first kind of bit of a job. I'd done previously an internship at RBS, which was more like during one of the school summers or like the university summers.
Hmm.
So it was interesting working in that corporate world. I absolutely loved it. I think it was nice to get kind of earn money for the first time properly.
Mm.
Took a break and went traveling for a bit. Came back and well, since then hopped around careers. So I haven't had a straight channel into what I've wanted to do.
So that's really interesting because I really advocate for doing that, especially in your 20s and trying different things. Can you just take us through your kind of thought process as you jumped around? Was it I want to learn new skills, or was it just an opportunity came up and you were like, you know what, I'm going to try this out?
Yeah, I think all of the above. I think I was listening to a podcast recently, actually, one of Stephen Bartlett's, and I've forgotten her name, but a wonderful lady was speaking about kind of what speaking about how she's a life coach now and's got a really successful business, but speaking about how she kind of did the same, like jumping between careers, not really understanding why. But I think for me, like what she explains is that nothing really called to me. I was in these jobs and didn't have this passion. It was like I enjoyed my work sometimes, sometimes I didn't. And
Mm.
that's very obvious, you know, when you don't enjoy something, but sometimes you just think this isn't really fulfilling me. I don't think this is what I'm made to do. I don't feel like I'm being utilized maybe to my full potential. That was big. And for someone like me, I've always been an all-rounder, you know, taking maths, English, history, chemistry, that like all of that spectrum, been quite active, done, you know, I like to be creative. And so it was never an obvious path. And I think when you have a few different skill sets and different interests as well, it's not always easy. And so, yeah, I jumped between things because I felt sometimes I wasn't being fulfilled. Sometimes I wasn't being challenged. Sometimes I felt my skills could be better utilized. And yeah, I think that's honestly, and I love to learn more and more about different things. So, of course, that's where I jumped as well.
Mm. I was listening to a podcast recently. I'm much the same as you, a bit of a general all rounder. No,
Mm-hmm.
you know, one thing called to me, and I always found it really difficult. Just like you say, never quite feeling fulfilled in what you're doing. And somebody made such a great point, and they said, "Don't follow your passion, follow your curiosity." And I'd
Absolutely.
never thought about it like that, and it makes so much sense, doesn't it?
I think so. And I think you should never stop being curious because there's always more to learn. There's new things coming up all the time. And I think where you can really find value and really find things that you might want to go after is in discovering new opportunities. And that's normally things that maybe aren't as obvious.
Mm. And did you find it, or were you worried at the potential look of your CV? Because growing up, I don't know if you were told the same, you know, job hoppers, as they were called back in the day.
Mhm.
People might look at your CV and think, oh, well, they don't stay here very long. But I don't know if you agree, but for our generation, it's not looked at in the same way. You actually, employers look at you and go, wow, look at all the different skill sets they've got here.
Yeah, and I think back in the day it was very common for people to stay at their jobs 20 plus years, and that was certainly the experience when I was interning at RBS, that you know a lot of people had that, same as any traditional firms I've worked for. And yeah, I think how are you going to ever be challenged if you're in the same role for your whole life? How are you ever going to meet new people and actually think in new ways? I think that can only be gained from one, working different places, traveling different into different places, and being put out of your comfort zone. And I'm not saying that, I don't want people to take this the wrong way, that people that stay in one thing for their whole life are coasting, but I would challenge them to throw themselves in a high growth startup and see what boundaries they might push with that.
I think this is going to be really valuable for people listening because we get told a lot that, you know, job hopping is going to be part of the future, but it's actually quite a scary step, I think, to change industries and completely change what you're doing. So how did you approach that when you did change industry?
I think also, let's just go through the industries. I've been in finance, tech, fashion, now tech/Web3, um, among other things on the side. And I think, like we were saying, curiosity is good and being well read on that. Um, I'm always super interested in understanding things. So reading lots, having that relevant knowledge, speaking to people, and actually thinking, what way do I think I could add value to this industry? I think honestly, interviews now, I was reading a book recently, quite a famous one. It was written a few years ago now. Are you smart enough to work at Google?
Mm.
And it talks about loads of interview theory and kind of how companies actually interview people compared to like the 1990s. And I don't know, I think now everyone has probably most jobs that have the base qualifications, and actually what they're interviewing is, yes, your competency to an extent, but I mean, for my job currently, all I needed to do was, prove that I understood what the industry was, how I could think strategically and creatively, what I could add, and if people like me. Because ultimately, when you're in a remote company, especially, people, you're going to have to be cohesive and get on with everyone, and people have to get on with you and think that you're an agreeable person and that you can make the environment a better one.
That's a brilliant point. And we actually did an episode a while back where we had a software engineer come on, a data scientist, and he'd done over 100 different interviews across a year because the startup he was working at was growing rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of laid bare what they actually look for in the interview. And that was the number one thing that nobody seems to have been told, that actually, okay, you're all going to be pretty competent. To be honest with you, we'll weed that out early doors if you're not.
Yeah,
It's about getting on with the person. And
100%.
the amount of stories he came up with from these interviews, and the people just didn't get that at all. That, they didn't try and find common ground, which is a great one in an interview. But how do you go about explaining, or showing your skill sets when you're in an interview, because you've done so many different things? How do you kind of get that across?
I think it depends what they're asking, but I think it's also it's tricky because I think it is so reactive. But I think it's knowing your stuff and knowing enough about the company and the industry to think of ways in which you can add value and be helpful. They don't want people, especially in the industry I'm in now, people, you're not told these are your things to do in the day. These are, this is your work. It's very proactive, and it's very thinking, what are the problems? How can I solve them? What can I propose to change the way we do things? And it's a very different way to working at trad companies, I'd say. And so to demonstrate that skill set, I think you need to come up with ideas and kind of even questions, challenges to the way that things are already being done, and also genuine interest in what it actually is like at that company, or what their own, like the person who's interviewing you, what their path has been like. I think kind of showing that you can, and I think in doing this you show that you can think on your feet, that you are a problem solver, that you're empathetic, that you're interested and interesting. And I think all of these things, I would say, contribute to someone viewing you as employable.
We talk about sort of CVs versus LinkedIn versus all these different ways now you can sort of advertise yourself to employers. And, you've got loads of experience of going for different jobs. So what do you think about the traditional route into companies? Have you submitted CVs, or have you gone above and beyond and tried something else, or reached out to someone on LinkedIn? Like,
Yeah.
how have you approached it?
So this is an interesting one, and I potentially before just went the traditional way, either through submitting CVs, or maybe a friend saying, "There's a job at my company, can I put your CV?" or like that kind of thing. I briefly the way I got my job at MoonPay is that I briefly worked at Taylor Jones, which is essentially a recruitment firm, and all I was doing was the BD client acquisition. That my role was essentially getting clients on board. I saw a massive gap in the market in crypto and crypto recruiting. There were massive. This was in like the boom, like 2021,
Hmm.
and I just saw all these roles coming about on Telegram and LinkedIn, on all these different sites and places. And I said to my founder at the time, look, I'm going to really do crypto as well as tech, because their specialty was tech. And the way I did it, and the way I was getting businesses to use our services was approaching hiring managers, CEOs, CMO, like all these all kind of senior people within the organizations. And that would actually get you time with them. And so that's what I did to MoonPay. And I ended up saying, can we have your business? And they said, oh, you think we should give you a job? You seem to know a lot about crypto, right? So it was, and I at the time I'd only been in my previous company for 2 months, but
Wow.
it was attractive enough an offer for me to think, you know what, I think this company is doing amazing things in the space. So I would say there is power, and it's not always easy because a lot of people reach out over LinkedIn, but I'm now getting a lot of inboxes myself from people. I'd love to learn more about your role. Some of these are really eager college grads, that I see open roles. Can I speak to you? And you know what? A lot of these companies have a big referral system. So it's worth getting, if you can, someone to refer you and, grab some time if you can. And I tried to do it on an ad hoc basis with people that want to speak to me. Because if you can get an employee to refer you, we get a payment if it's successful and if that person passes their probationary period. And also that person has a way bigger chance of getting hired because they've got someone to advocate.
That's really interesting that, you've taken that time. Like you said, you worked there for 2 months at your previous company. And then because you got the time with these companies who are, Web3 super new, there's not many people that actually understand the industry. So you've taken that and ended up getting a job from it, which is just
Without
fantastic.
looking, it was just
Yeah.
like in interest. And it was right place, right time, which I do think a lot of this job market is sometimes. But yeah, that passion and that interest and curiosity, I think, as well.
So Web3, let's have a bit of chat about that. The industry is really, really super new, but it's growing rapidly.
Mhm.
So what do you think the space is going to look like in the next 5 years? Do you see more and more hires, more and more different skill sets coming into the industry?
Yeah, so I think we're still early in what Web3 adoption looks like. My company MoonPay, we champion mass adoption, but I still think that there's a lot of iterations because ultimately, you know, people know now what Web3, what crypto is. Um, it's not now just a matter of education, it's also people who are actively against it. And so it's about converting them. And I think where Web3 needs to go in order for mass adoption to take place and it to be mainstream is for Web3 and blockchain technology to solve Web2 problems or make things even easier. So the average person has no idea that they're using the technology. We look at it similarly to the internet, the .com, the Web2. Before, people were very, very speculative. They call Bill Gates strange, etc. Like all of this stuff. And now people use a computer without really understanding that, this was before time. It really, really, people saw it as some like new technology that we didn't understand. And so I think it needs to go into this next iteration of, yes, it's cool to have these NFTs, but we really going towards utility and thinking of things that are going to be done in a more efficient, sleeker way where the average person is not even aware.
Mm. Yeah, I was listening to a podcast this morning actually, with the guys that started the Bored Ape Yacht Club,
Yeah.
and they said something about they wanted to make it mum proof. So they want to get to a point where their mums would comfortably be able to go online and purchase an NFT, which I think you're right. I think it's a few years away to get that adoption. I think there's been a lot of articles kind of pushing people away and just an NFT is a JPEG, that's you've seen that in the headlines. It's just a picture. What value has it got? But I think we will move forward, and I think it's going to be a huge, huge part of the future, don't you?
Yes, but I think I agree, right? A lot of people just see NFTs as, oh, that's a picture. But actually NFTs, they represent ownership.
Mm.
It's not, you can have ownership of so many different things. There's things like fractionalized NFTs where they are more like holdings of a certain asset class, or that there's so many different applicabilities. I think this is just taken over, like, it was really creative artsy. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. We've really facilitated some creators really becoming successful from it. But I think we need to get out of the one dimensional use case of these things. There's so many different applications, and I see that as the future. So, things like memberships, things like tickets, NFT ticketing, where things can be transferred and not sold, where maybe it's in the music industry where blockchain technology creators are having all their royalties instead of, or maybe it's not royalties, maybe it's money instead of it going through a producer or a label. I think there's so many different things we can think about that's maybe not this what we think as NFTs right now.
Oh, certainly. They need to have utility to grow it, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Your role currently, so partner marketing manager, how have you found that? What's the kind of skill sets you've been learning, and what does that actually involve?
Yeah, I mean, so this role didn't exist until I kind of said we should probably have it. We've grown as a company so much in marketing. So I came on initially as a project manager, just helping manage the various projects we were executing. Never worked in marketing before, but my old boss now, who's now left, hired me. She just needed some person to help execute, and I thought we were doing some really exciting things. So now partner marketing is definitely more focused on when we have new partners coming into the pipeline, which is quite a lot, how we would go to market with them across our socials, PR, internal blog posts or external things, and how we launch that. And so depending on who the partner is, it might be a bit of a lower lift or a heavier lift. If they're a big brand that we want to shout about, or Web3 company or something, we might do a bigger co-marketing strategy. And that could be anything from events, Twitter spaces, all the rest of it. And so my job really is to coordinate that with external, internal, and make sure that we're set with our dates. And since I've joined, there's been lots of different announcements and things going. So it's about diarising that and making sure we're aligned. And also, ultimately, we're integrating a tech product. So liaising with product to make sure like that's all fine, that bugs are fine. And yeah, it's pretty fast paced.
Not many people sort of talk about the whole partnerships sphere within different industries, and I think it's a really interesting space because your varied skill set is perfect for this, isn't it? Because like you've just explained, there's so many different things you need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think ultimately there are a million different things all the time to do, and also thinking strategically about, okay, well, how can we best is there more things we could do? Is there more things to elevate? And I must be honest, like I'm not a marketing experienced person at all, and so I'm just constantly learning, and people my colleagues who have been in the industry a long time, and people that have had maybe more Web3 knowledge as well, and also if the companies we're working with, looking at things that they've done that have been successful. I mentioned before, we're really targeting that creator economy. So we're right now I'm dealing with more of our partners we're signing, and also our current partners, and looking at how we can elevate the things that we've already got on board. But also, and to your point about wider partnerships, we have a partnerships lead, and the strategy there has been more external things, more culturally relevant deals, and that's super exciting to me as well. And so what I like about my company is that there's ability to really get involved in so many different areas, and I think that's maybe, I'd say, congruent with these high growth startups where there's so much to be going on, there's so many different ideas and so much possibility, where it's really welcomed for you to kind of get stuck in and propose things. And not all ideas will come into fruition, but definitely there's a platform for you to propose things, which I love.
And what do you think's been the biggest positive of your career so far? Something that you've thought, wow, I can't believe I've actually done that.
So having the opportunity to travel to some of the amazing locations and represent my company has been amazing. And meeting some of the leaders in the industry, I think that's been really cool. And being at the company I am now, being on calls with some leadership in some of the most successful Web3 companies. It's really awesome. And I think I'm constantly learning. And yeah, because I like to travel and I like to meet new people all the time, and I'm quite extroverted in that way. And the job has really facilitated that and welcomed that. And I think that's really, really cool.
Mm. And on the flip side, what's been the biggest challenge of your career so far?
My whole career.
Mm.
I honestly think it's actually been finding something that I'm passionate enough about to think, okay, yeah, this is my calling. This is what I want to do. Or now I feel like I can make a difference. Because I think when you're not maybe as interested or as invested in a career or even a job that you're doing, I think you can feel like you don't have as much purpose. And I think you can feel a bit, I don't know, like misplaced or and it's tricky because you see online, you see people on LinkedIn, you see people on Instagram, and they're doing amazing things in their work and they're making a massive difference, amazing projects. It seems so exciting, and it can. I remember at one point a few years ago feeling, how do I even start to feel like I can do something or get involved? I don't even know the starting point. And so that was challenging finding that, and I think through my curiosity in Web3 and crypto just during lockdown and finding something I was genuinely interested in has landed me in a career that I didn't even realize I wanted, right? Which is insane. And I feel very satisfied day to day, which is amazing.
And then looking back at your career, is there anything you'd change or would you go down the same path you have?
That's a tricky question. I think like we always say maybe we change something, but I don't think it would have landed me where I am today. Because I always think, oh, could I have stayed longer at certain things to make it look better? Yeah, like we said about staying in careers, etc. But I think I don't know the danger of staying longer is that it's harder to leave. Um, yeah, I think maybe now aligning my core values and working for something that I actually believe in, and if kind of being a bit more in tune with that, I regret maybe not recognizing that sooner. But as I said, you never really know where that could land you later on.
That's a great answer. Well,
Yeah.
Katie, thank you so much for coming in, having a chat with us. It's been a pleasure hearing all about your career. I think this will be super helpful for anyone listening.
Well, I hate to say, thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
And where can people find you and your company and what you're up to?
Um, on LinkedIn, absolutely. Feel free to add me, write to me. I try to answer my messages. I get a few, but yeah,
Brilliant. Thank you, Katie.
thanks.